Hi, this is Robert Pandya, and you're listening to Chasing the Horizon, a podcast by, for, and about motorcyclists.
Welcome to Chasing the Horizon, brought to you by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. Subscribe in iTunes or stream from the website at bmwmoa.org/podcast. My name is Wes Fleming. Thanks for joining us. My guest on this episode has a lot to say about the motorcycle industry, so instead of getting in depth on one story, I thought I'd hit some highlights in motorcycle news that I found of particular interest. There will be links included in the newsletter and on the website, so be sure to check those out. You can sign up for the newsletter at tinyletter.com/chasingthehorizon, and you can check out the brand new website at horizon.bmwmoa.org. The old link for moa.org/podcast will still work. Drop me a line if you'd like to be a guest contributor to the blog. Last episode, all the news was about Harley-Davidson's poor Q4 financial report. And since then, unfortunately, the hits have kept coming. Harley announced a recall affecting the anti-lock brake systems on over 250,000 motorcycles, including 170,000 of them sold in the USA. Apparently, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has been investigating these braking issues since the summer of 2016. There are lawsuits in progress, and it looks like it's going to be a huge mess. The recall covers 31 models from the 2008 through the 2011 model years. So be sure to check out the NHTSA website and see if your VIN is covered in the recall. Harley's not the only manufacturer sending out recalls, though. Polaris in Australia issued a recall on all their Indian Roadmaster touring bikes sold there, saying an electrical harness in the trunk isn't fully weather sealed and water could get into unused terminals and cause corrosion that might affect the electrical system. I mention this specifically because I know a few people in Australia listen to the podcast. Of course, I don't know if they ride Indian Roadmasters or not, but there you go. Hey guys. Or gals. Also on the recall list lately are MV Agusta, who say the front brake master cylinder on its F4RR and F4RC bikes could malfunction. Last but not least, Kawasaki is recalling about 4,000 late model ZX-10 bikes because of an apparent weakness in the transmission that could result in gears breaking. Kawasaki's replacing 3 output gears and an input gear in that recall. I won't get into recalls in every episode because there's often too many to keep up with. Recalls are a fact of life for nearly all motor vehicles. We just tend to pay more attention to them when they involve our motorcycles. I specifically wanted to mention the other ones so that it didn't look like I was beating on Harley-Davidson, even though they've had a lot of recalls, but they make a lot of motorcycles. So they share a lot of parts across platforms. When they have a recall on one part, it may affect, dozens of models. Those of you who listen regularly will know I'm a race fan, and I'm hoping to get some racers on the show later this season and next season too. I have my wish list, but feel free to send your suggestions. Lots of my friends are excited because Major League Baseball pitchers and catchers reported to training camp last week, but all I can think about is MotoGP and World Superbike. Now, speaking of MotoGP, there's a new track on the circuit for 2018. The riders did 3 days of testing at the Buriram International Circuit, which has only been in existence since 2014. It was designed by Herman Tilke and has 12 turns over a 4.5 kilometer length. That's 2.8 miles for all us Americans. Prime Minister of Thailand, Prayut Chan-o-cha, hosted 5 MotoGP riders recently to show off the city of Bangkok and the nearby and quite impressive Temple of Dawn. Jorge Lorenzo and Andrea Dovizioso, sorry, I mangled that, sorry, bud, who both ride Ducatis, had some difficulties with the track during testing, and even superstar Valentino Rossi called the track, quote, a bit difficult. Marc Marquez, who is the reigning champion of the circuit, is probably one of the happiest guys in the sport. Even he called the track challenging, but of course he said he was overall very happy with his test. Remember that Marquez is the guy who is well known for finding the limits of both his skill and the capabilities of his motorcycles by pushing himself until he crashes. He crashed, this is a notable statistic, he crashed his Honda RC213V 27 times in 2017. I read somewhere that and of course math, evens out to 1.5 crashes per race weekend. So he's definitely if he's a happy guy about it, calling it challenging, you know it's a challenging track. In the last bit of MotoGP news, they're shortening 5 races by 1 lap, another race by 2 laps, and the Valencia race by 3 laps to make the races throughout the season more uniform in length. Some support the change, but others oppose it. Of course, it's a little bit controversial. The changes will make the races all of a similar length, which is something that broadcasters around the world have asked MotoGP to do so that they can better plan their presentation of the races. Moto2 and Moto3 will phase in those changes throughout this season and into next season. Now, there's not usually much controversial in World Superbike from year to year, he said sarcastically. But Jonathan Ray's domination of the circuit last season has apparently led SBK organizers to inflict a 14,100 rev limit on his Kawasaki motorcycles. Everybody else on 4-cylinder superbikes has a limit of 14,700 revs. They're even building in another cut of 250 RPMs in case Ray jumps out to a lead too early in the season. As you can imagine, Kawasaki racing team leader Yoshimoto Matsuda is not the least bit happy about the unprecedented restriction. What else is there that I can hit on quickly? Let's see. Royal Enfield enjoyed a 31% jump in sales in January 2018 over January 2017. Last month, they sold nearly 78,000 motorcycles, 76,000 of them in India alone. Now, that means they're not selling a lot of bikes in the rest of the world, but with their upcoming push behind the Interceptor, the GT750, and the Himalayan, we might see that number sold worldwide tick up a bit. Yamaha announced record numbers in 2017 as well. They sold $9.8 billion worth of motorcycles all over the world. And apparently their robot division is doing pretty well to boot. On the other side of Japan, Honda announced they'll be building a manufacturing plant in Bangladesh, but didn't really get into too many details in the press releases that I saw. But you can bet they'll be making thousands of bikes under 200 cc's there, and maybe even their brand new X-Blade, which is not only the coolest name for a motorcycle ever, but it's also Honda's newest 100cc engined motorcycle. At the other spectrum from a tiny 160cc bike is Suzuki's venerable Hayabusa, which according to a recent patent application may be getting what they're calling a semi-automatic transmission in the near future. Reading through the patent application, it sounds like the rider will still decide when to shift, but the ECU will take care of doing the actual shifting. So it sounds to me like it's more like a highly advanced form of shift assist like BMW has on their newest bikes. One report about the technology that I read mentioned that Suzuki has been careful to engineer in the feel of shifting so that they're not messing with the rider's brain too much. I guess that's kind of like making a digital camera still have a shutter noise. Riding a motorcycle is such a physical, tactile experience that I'm not sure I would believe I shifted the bike without some kind of physical feedback, which is what they said they've engineered in. So there's some news snippets for this episode, and let's get into the discussion. Okay, the discussion portion of this podcast episode, that was brilliant, is with Robert Pandya. Did I say that right, Robert? Your last name?
You did. That's pretty much how my mom says it. So that's pretty solid, man.
Good. Yeah. And I've met Robert a couple of times. He's well known in the industry for his marketing efforts at Victory and several other companies. But I'm going to give Robert a chance to introduce himself. So welcome to the show, Robert.
Thanks. Thanks very much. Yeah, I've had a fortunate career and nothing that I think I ever could have designed. It's sort of like when you go on a trail ride and you kind of know where you are, but not really. And you just go and stab it up one trail and the next, and all of a sudden you're at some epic lookout. So, at turning 50 and looking back at my career, I'm pretty stoked for everything that I've done in the past. And I've had a chance to work with, Aprilia was my first OEM job, but that was after I had some experience being both a salesman and a service writer at multi-line dealerships. And after I did some road racing and CMRA in Texas, I even raced YSR 50s for a little while, which was a riot. And then I was working at a dealership and as a freelance photographer and stuff, and ended up meeting the marketing director for Aprilia, who coaxed me with an actual salary, which was kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's always nice, isn't it, to get paid?
Yeah, it was. Coming from a freelance photography gig to, having checks that didn't bounce was pretty sweet. So anyway, I did that for what I thought was going to be about a year till I bought new camera equipment, went back to being a shooter, and it ended up turning into just a whole career. So Bill Stone from Aprilia hired me in, and I spent about 10 years with the Aprilia brand. I was one of a handful of employees who carried over when Piaggio bought Aprilia, and in that time I also got to play with Moto Guzzi, a little bit with Vespa, not too much, but certainly understood that product.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about Piaggio is, their scope in the motorcycle and the two-wheel industry. A lot of people don't realize all the brands that they own.
They own a bunch, and they're really good at screwing up a few of them too. So, but they really, unbelievable engineers and designers, and the technology that they have is phenomenal. But boy, do they bite sometimes on the dealer relations side of things, and really understand how some of the broader industry works, at least in the U.S. From my experience. So. I said to Kent Kunitsugu from Sport Rider magazine once, he asked me about my relationship with Aprilia, and I said Aprilia is like a really beautiful ex-girlfriend who I had some amazing times with, but I'm just not going to let her screw me over anymore. So that's that brand. But anyway, it really is that there's a lot of power, there's a lot of passion with that brand, and I kid, but I do love it. I love their product, but they definitely have some opportunities to be better in the States. So when they kept insisting on wanting me in New York, and I'm not a New York guy. I like living in Texas, so I ended up being in Texas after about a decade with Aprilia, and soon after picked up Victory Motorcycles as a client, and then a decade later, by then we'd rolled into having Indian Motorcycles in the fray as well. Did a little bit of work with Timber Sled as part of Polaris, and then sprinkled into all of that, I've had a lot of involvement in international motorcycle shows, tours. Did some work with Kimco, and did and helped launch New Viz this last year, the New Viz head-up display. So did that. So it's been a varied career, and this past year I've had a chance after 10 years with working around Polaris and everything, and launching the Chief and the Scout and the Wrecking Crew. It was an opportunity to kind of take a break. They gave me a new Indian Springfield as a thank you gift, and
excellent.
And so I've had a kind of a bit of a break, and that's sort of what brought Give a Shift up for me.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk about Give a Shift here in a second, but one thing I'm curious about, your kind of career path in the motorcycle industry may have started by accident, but you got into motorcycles at one point in your life on purpose. What was your very first motorcycle that you rode?
Yeah, the first thing I rode that had a hand throttle was some Cushman-powered thing that within 10 feet I'd driven into the side of a house, like through a bush and into a house. And I was like, that was amazing. That was the best thing. I was a kid at a friend's house, and they were like, "Here, you can try this." And I froze with the throttle. This is pre-YouTube era, so it's just burned in my memory,
right?
And which was great. But my first real motorcycle was a Suzuki GM250, and I really came at it. Gosh, I think it was in 1982, maybe something like that. Drum brakes on both ends. So
oh, nice.
Anti-lock brakes. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
But that was my first bike, and it came completely out of a desire for transportation. It wasn't because like the romance of two wheels or listening to Bob Seger albums or anything like that. It was just this was just a cheap way for me to get around. I couldn't afford a car. My dad. Somehow I convinced him to co-sign for my $1,800 loan for this bike, and I got it, and I rode the hell out of it, and ended up bringing it down to Texas when I moved to Texas after about a year and a half after high school. So.
Gotcha. So how did you, now you mentioned the Indian Springfield, but I happen to know, because I follow you on social media, that you got a different bike recently that you're really enjoying.
You know, I'm fortunate to be exposed to a lot of different motorcycles in this career, and I've got about 7 right now, and it's sort of like my shoe closet, you know. So
yeah.
if we're going hiking, I got an adventure bike, and I've got a hardcore dual sport bike. Both of those are KTMs, and I've got an old Honda Hawk GT that was my endurance race bike for my road racing days.
Yeah, those are fantastic bikes.
Yeah, it's the permanent project apparently. So, and then FZ09, which is a Riot, my Indian Springfield, and an Aprilia supermoto bike. That was a practice bike from the Darrell Atkins race team.
Oh, cool.
The thing, I mean, that's its own beast. It's so great. I did just pick up a Zero FX, and it's the lightest version of all the Zeros. And my friends at AF1 Racing in Austin are Zero dealers, and I honestly was not inclined to buy a motorcycle. I bought that 1290 KTM from them a year prior, and I was just visiting the store, and then I saw this used one. It had 300 miles. It was all black and only had 1 battery pack in it, not 2, and so it looked a lot more lightweight and really technical and neat. And I was like, oh crap, I guess I'm buying a bike.
Sometimes you choose the bike, and other times the bike chooses you.
Yeah, right. I know. It's like going to a puppy mill and just knowing that somebody's going to be staring at you. But anyway, that bike followed me home, and I live in a little town in Texas, in Georgetown, north of Austin, and it's only when you're hooting around and being an idiot, you got about 25 miles range on it at best, right? Which you have to work hard to get to go 25 miles in my town,
Gotcha.
So it's perfect for my little town. And I just, I could sneak out of the driveway and, pretend I'm, a ninja stealth motorcycle guy. It's really I really, really enjoy it. And anybody who's just pissy about electric motorcycles doesn't really understand what they're for. It'd be like whining how crappy a Goldwing is on a motocross track. It's like, come on, just use the tool in the right environment, and it's the best possible thing. They're great.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly with Harley's recent announcement about their electric motorcycle, I think the electric motorcycles are going to get a lot more mainstream attention.
It's really interesting that they announced that product 18 months prior to launch, because I can't recall any other time that Harley Davidson has said, we're a year and a half before you can get this. That's usually the play for like Ducati or MV Agusta or somebody else. It's a very European mindset to say, hey, I know we just delivered that limited edition bike from last year, but by the way, here's the next new hot one, and right. And so I think it's really interesting from an industry standpoint to watch what Harley does and how they not only set up their marketing, but their dealer training, because dealer training is going to be critical. They failed with Buell, they failed with MV Agusta in the past, and this Livewire thing, or the series of bikes, whatever they come up with, is going to be another anomaly with the same logo, but another anomaly in the lineup, and you don't want it to end up being like that. The best handling Harley sold to date was that XR 1200, sort of semi-sportster based flat track street bike. What an awesome motorcycle that was.
It really was too.
For all of 3 years, and which is a bummer. So these guys need to do well by expanding their market. They are driving a narrative that helps take eyeballs off of financial reports and take attention away from some downturns in the market. And because they're the biggest beast in the zoo, everybody is watching what they're doing, and it's so I think it's fantastic for other electric brands out there because it's going to legitimize the category in the same way that that the Prius did for hybrid cars.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, too. And it's a good segue into why I wanted to have you on the show, which is to talk about Give a Shift, which was a initiative and now has become a movement kind of thing that you put together towards the end of 2017. Can you tell us a little bit about, not just a little bit about what Give a Shift is about, but your inspiration for gathering all those people together for the initial conversation?
I got to tell you, Wes, I had no idea that it would end up being what it is now. And the truth of it is that, as I said last year, I'd kind of dropped out a little while and become a little like an informed consumer is how I saw it, as I wasn't reading like industry reports, and I wasn't reading MIC stuff, and I wasn't, looking through company data or reading sales reports or even writing that stuff or writing copy for, you know what I mean? It's like that whole function of working close to OEM stuff had just like gone away. So I was getting to read motorcycle magazines and that kind of thing. But from an industry standpoint, I'd sort of dropped out a little bit. And I thought, all right, well, IMS show is coming up, and I wanted to go to that in Long Beach and see a bunch of my friends who I really missed and everything. And I thought, well, maybe I can get some people together and we'll sit around a table at a bar somewhere and have some discussion about the motorcycle industry. So I kind of lobbed it out, and I literally only put it out on my own personal Facebook page and a LinkedIn post. And the response back was unbelievable. I mean, I just had all kinds of people who were like, yeah, I want to be there. I want to be there. I was like, holy crap, this thing just turned into a bigger thing. And it took me a while to figure out like how to manage it. And we ended up having a round table with 25 really smart, like moto savvy people from a variety of backgrounds. Not all industry people, mind you, but from a huge variety of backgrounds, but all really committed to positive motorcycling. We held it at an offsite, like a semi-secret little location. We had we recorded everything. We produced a report out of that, and everyone had the opportunity to be, to keep their name off the report and to sort of be there in secret if they wanted to, because
sure.
There's certain sensitivities with certain OEMs and that kind of thing. And only one person chose to do that, which really blew me away. So the names of the co-authors on that report are fantastic. And have great variety. And we ended up sort of discussing a lot of things for 3 hours and came up with a sort of top 5 topics that the industry needed to pay attention to in our humble opinion, and put that report out there. And then Charles Fleming at the LA Times wrote a story on it, and it blew up literally into, he told me, the biggest business story in the LA Times.
Oh, that's fantastic.
In the month of December. Yeah. And so with that, it's like all of a sudden, like now I'm serving this master, that I didn't really expect. And so I want to do well by it. There's high expectations out there. But we really want to address, I want to do more roundtables on the 5 sort of takeaway topics from the main report, and then sort of wrap it all up and be able to say, like, here's the whole Give a Shift initiative with enough time to positively affect motorcycling by the spring of next year.
Sure. If people want to read the report, what's the URL they can go to on the web to get that report?
Yeah, it's motogiveashift.com.
And that's
MOTO give
shift.
a shift.
Shift. Be very careful when you say that.
There's definitely a few F's in there. But anyway, but if you head over to that, and then people can download the report, and there's almost it's a 60-page transcript of everything that was said.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
It's unattributed. Yeah, if you had a chance to read it, I appreciate it, and you get to be the a fly on the wall, which was a very smart conversation, I think. And I'm really proud of who was there and what was said, and happy to kind of carry this weight. Although, I guarantee that I've been knocked off of a few, Christmas card lists. So,
well, and when you work inside the industry for as long as you have and develop strong opinions about how things are done and how they could be improved, you're going to blunt a few noses somewhere along the way. Not everybody likes to hear somebody else's truth. We all kind of think we know what we're doing, and when somebody else comes along and says, "No, you're wrong. This is what we're doing," whether you're right or wrong, you're kind of harshing their mellow sort of. And that can really affect the way people perceive you. But telling the truth, telling the truth about the industry is going to help us in the long run, even if it's an unvarnished truth that is unpleasant for some of the people in the industry.
Yeah, you're spot on, and the parallel I made is like we've all been on group motorcycle rides, and occasionally we're on a group ride where one person is underskilled or overconfident or worse, both,
Right.
And we've had to, and we at some point we've been in that group where we've had to make an intervention to say to that person, "Hey, you're going to hurt yourself, or you're going to hurt somebody else, and you need to calm down, or you need to, maybe you need a little more practice, or let me help you." Right. How you deliver that message is really important. If it's fair and if it's constructive, then that person by the end of the ride was going to appreciate where you come from.
Yeah.
If you're a jerk about it, then that person is not only going to not want to hear from you again, that person now continues. They haven't gotten any better, and so really, Give a Shift is that kind of intervention. And the point of it is, I've been asked, well, doesn't the AMA do this? Doesn't the MIC do this? Doesn't, are OEMs doing this sort of thing? They may all be doing it. They're doing it in their own way through various initiatives, but there isn't really a major public discourse that's open to anybody and everybody. And, to have that conversation with the MIC, you need to be a member, and the buy-in on the member end is
steep,
like over $800. And you also end up signing paperwork that I'm not allowed to discuss what was discussed at the MIC meeting. It's for internal use only. So you can imagine, like, a concerned parts counter guy or somebody who owns an independent motorcycle shop might not have the ability to be part of that. And that's really what Give a Shift is about, being something that's free. I don't charge you anything. I don't ask you for your email address. There is you can sign up and be on an email list, which I don't give away. I'm not here to sell you a marketing report afterwards or whatever. I've made my money. I'm good. I have no debt, and I have a bunch of great motorcycles that I need to go ride. So this is my way of like sort of giving back to an industry that has essentially paid for my life, and that's where it comes from. So I hope people take it as that and use it as a launch pad for making motorcycling better, no matter where you're at in the industry.
Yeah, and hopefully that's something that we can all learn from. Yeah, and I definitely encourage people to go and read the report. I'm kind of a transcript junkie. I read transcripts, so I found that very interesting. But the report distills the whole conversation down into, it's still a big report, but it's a good size, and the content in it is really kind of eye-opening. And I also, you guys are running a blog too. I saw you have a new post this week from a Canadian industry, a guy that works at a dealership. And is a relatively
he's a marketer.
Yeah, he's a relatively recent
marketer. Sorry, go ahead, bud.
That's all right. He's relatively recent to the motorcycling world. He's only been riding for 4 or 5 years. So he kind of brings that perspective of not being on a motorcycle his whole life or half his life to, his skills as a marketing person.
Yeah, and he comes from being a marketer, so that kind of fresh perspective is what we need. We looking at the data, it's like new motorcycle sales are basically been flat since 2009.
Yeah.
What types of motorcycles has been selling has been sort of churning in there a little bit, but overall sales have been flat. So it's the position of some of the national organizations out there that motorcycling has effectively, quote, right-sized, meaning there was a big housing bubble and all of a sudden there was this extra money on the market and everyone rushed out and bought motorcycles and so we rode the wave of that. And then after the crash in 2008, 2009, then things got kind of back to normal, which I don't buy that. I mean, new housing starts are way up, like truck sales are way up.
Yes, they are.
There's a whole lot of indicators that say, consumer confidence is up. The stock market is double what it was, back then. And so anyway, there's problems on a broader societal level in North America. But the problem as it relates to motorcycling, it hits on desirability. And I think it's a cross-generational issue where we have some baby boomers who are in control at senior marketing and sales levels and kind of that check writing level at OEMs and at national organizations. And then we have Gen X who are sitting in kind of middle management, maybe some upper management, who were born analog but will die digital. So it's Generation X, of which I'm proudly a part of, is this transition generation. And then we as a marketing, we essentially skipped over Generation X, and we're screaming about trying to sell motorcycles to more millennials and kids, to help save the industry. So that is just a real that's a real disconnect for us right now.
Yeah,
and it's a bummer that is the case, but it is, and we need to find the language that helps connect desirability back to motorcycling for everyone.
So how can like a regular person, who's a consumer and not necessarily an industry employee or mover or shaker, how can regular folks that ride motorcycles deal with the shift in the industry and help improve it beyond trying to encourage their buddies to go get a bike? What can we do?
You hit on the main thing. Number one is ambassadorship. Okay, and that's one of the topics that's in our 5 there. So turning existing motorcyclists into better ambassadors. How do you do that? And very tactically, at the end of the report, there's we highlight the 5 things, but then there's this little smorgasbord of ideas that are that some are small, some are bigger, things that can be done at a local level or can be done at a personal level. That's on the back end of the report. And and again, anybody can read that. It's free ideas. Go run with it. But that ambassadorship for motorcycling is really, really critical. And so being conscious of how you talk about motorcycling is a key part of it. We've all been in conversations with non-motorcyclists or on-the-fence motorcyclists who have the story about their uncle who got in an unfortunate accident, or about whatever sort of negative thing that they burned their leg on a exhaust pipe when they were little or something like that, right? And so we've all been around that. The thing is, though, is that we don't do a good job of expressing the positives of motorcycling in a compelling way. It's super easy to allow a negative discourse to continue on, whereas the positives are not discussed as well. Lane sharing is a key thing, and saying lane sharing versus lane splitting, that is a term that is more agreeable to non-riders.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. Yeah, it does. And so words matter. On the words matter subject, instead of I forbid myself from saying or writing or acknowledging beginner bikes as a phrase. Yeah, I read your blog post on that, and I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I think it's a big mistake. I think it's, it's like training bra. I mean, it's, it doesn't, it's not, it's not cool, right? And so
Right.
not that I'm speaking from brassiere experience myself, but as I've heard from my female friends. So anyway, the referring to small motorcycles as lightweight bikes or middleweight bikes or heavyweight bikes allows you to get a lightweight sport bike. That yes, it's good if you're a beginning rider, or yes, it's good to buy a lightweight dual-purpose bike as your first motorcycle. And it's not a good idea to buy a heavyweight or a middleweight bike that might make more power or weigh a little bit more than what you're really ready for. But it's a way easier place to be comfortable for a new rider to say that I'm on this lightweight. I bought the lightweight BMW 310 and I really love it. Mm-hmm. I bought the lightweight KTM Duke 390 and it's what a great bike. And that's all I need. There are scads of people potential customers out there on the market who will never need anything bigger than a 500 or 650 cc bike in their entire lives, their entire motorcycle. And as a culture, we've been trained to sort of ladder people up.
Into bigger.
And, exactly. And it's a huge mistake. So I mean, brands like Royal Enfield are doing an amazing job of saying we're going to be the king of the middleweight class, and you guys can have everything over 1,000 cc's. We don't care.
Yeah.
And then other brands that are still like on the horizon. Mahindra bought BSA, so that's an interesting thing happening right there, And so anyway, there are other opportunities out there that are not in conversation right now. And that's what it is to be a motorcycle ambassador, is to educate yourself on where things can go, to understand the perspective of what you're saying to some newbies' ears, and to just be a good shepherd. If say you're a traditional Harley guy and somebody's interested in riding, don't just drag them to the Harley Davidson shop and go look at a Sportster. It's like the normal thing. I'm going to go do that. Go visit the European shop. Go visit the Japanese shop. Maybe you're going to learn something yourself.
Yeah.
And vice versa. So anyway, the products on the market are phenomenal. What has to step up and what has to become better is those of us who are involved in motorcycling, either as engaged enthusiasts or as servants to what is just a great culture.
Yeah, I used to work at a small dealership here in Virginia, independent. It was multi-brand, Japanese and European. And I worked in the back doing some tech work. I wasn't a mechanic, but I did some tech work. And I saw all the time, one of the things that I used to say is that salespeople only, and this is no slag on salespeople because they're critically important to the industry, but I used to say that salespeople take care of the paperwork. It's your buddies that sell the motorcycle. And I can't tell you the number of times that I saw, some buddies come in, a small group, 2 or 3 guys, and one of them would take the brand new motorcycle rider straight over to the Ducatis and have him sit on a 916. This is back when the 916 was the top of their line. And, we sold a lot of 916s to guys who had never ridden a motorcycle before. And, you almost feel like you want to start a pool on how long it's going to be till it's back in the shop for major repairs.
I know, it's like combat training or something like that. I mean, it is really scary, and it's not, it's when you've been around it for a little bit and you realize the path that certain people are on, it's just really hard to allow that to continue to happen. Sales guys are motivated by making a commission. And, or motivated by an incentive that, nobody knows about or whatever. And that practice is one of the things that's hurt motorcycling's reputation. And so that's where give a shift. And as I look backwards on my moto life and then try and project something forward, that perspective is something that's earned over time. and it makes you realize like how damaging that kind of practice really is.
Yeah, and one of my good friends, a guy called Scott, that I'm hoping to have on the show here sometime soon. He decided he wanted to ride motorcycles. He'd never ridden a motorcycle before, so he went and he took the safety class. And then instead of going and buying a leader bike or a sport bike or a big Harley, he went and bought a 250cc, retro looking. I think it was a Suzuki, just a what we would call a UJM. And he rode that for a year, at least a year, and then stumbled into he really wanted a Bonneville because he loves the way they look. He wasn't necessarily looking for a bike that had, 2 or 5 or 6 times the displacement. The Bonneville was the bike that he, dreamed about, that he saw in his head when he closed his eyes as that's my motorcycle. So for him, it was more about, the style of motorcycle that he wanted to ride rather than the straight displacement. But I tried really hard not to say, oh, you'll want a bigger bike someday when he got that 250, because that's the bike that he felt that he was going to be the most comfortable on. And he rode it until he felt he wanted a different motorcycle, not necessarily a bigger motorcycle, just a different motorcycle. So I hear what you're saying, and I think you're absolutely on point with that, because we're somebody's friend that's going to help them buy a motorcycle, and we have to take that as a responsibility.
It is a responsibility, and the OEMs, their job is to sell and make money. Right. That's the function of a company, is to make money. So therefore, the bikes that have the most margin, the bikes that perhaps have the most power or technology, or the bikes that you can justify a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign around, are not these smaller displacement motorcycles. They tend to be the bikes that have a fatter margin, and the massive effort going into Honda's Goldwing program right now, for instance. And it's important. That's a heritage bike for them. It's a critically important motorcycle on the market. So I'm not saying they shouldn't be doing that. What I'm saying is that all of us, it's really easy to only look at whatever's being discussed as managed by media and marketing folks, of which I was a part of that. But the bikes that have been available in the last 10 years are phenomenal machines.
Absolutely.
The used bike market out there is just, I was literally just talking this morning with my waiter at the diner I go to for breakfast every day, and he's looking to get into riding. We were talking about Rebel 250s, just exactly the kind of conversation as you expect we would. I introduced him to Yamaha XT250. It's a dual sport bike because he lives out in the country a little bit. And I'm like, all those gravel roads? Well, you could go down them on this pretty comfortably.
Exactly.
And if you do tip over, it's cheap plastic bodywork. Nothing's painted. It's no big deal. And so I opened his eyes to a whole new possibility of what can be motorcycling that arguably is a better way to learn how to ride. And those kinds of conversations about used motorcycles, about approachability, about sustainability of this market, that's the kind of thing that we need to talk about. But that is not the kind of conversation that the OEMs generally want to put a lot of shoulder into, or the MIC, who's funded by mostly the Japanese OEMs. That's they are reflective of who sponsors their programs. So they're going to lean on new product. So to go back to your original questions, what can we do? Is if you're a smart motorcycle person, be an exceptional ambassador. Educate yourself on what's on the used market out there. Understand how to evaluate a motorcycle a little bit, whether it's on Craigslist or something like that, and walk somebody into a dealership. Let the sales guy kind of do their thing, but if they start steering them towards a big bike or that kind of thing, then just help nudge the conversation back to where it needs to be. If 20% of existing motorcyclists were to bring one new rider into our world, we would not be having this conversation right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, kind of one of the big criticisms you see, and I'm not going to start talking about politics, but around election time, one of the big criticisms that we see on social media is that things turn into an echo chamber. You gravitate to the people that agree with you so that you keep seeing the same opinions over and over and over again. And I think we have to avoid falling into that pitfall in the motorcycle industry as well, because, you got this guy that you see on a daily basis who's excited about getting a bike, but never would have thought to look at a dual sport until an ambassador for the sport says, "Hey, did you ever think about a dual sport?" And it's one of those light bulb moments. The same kind of thing happens all the time, and I think that's a really great approach to the ambassadorship to not just encourage people to ride, but to open their minds to all the different options.
Well, there's have you had a chance to listen in on the Motorcycles and Misfits podcast in the past?
Actually, I just learned about it from reading your blog, so I'm going to start listening to that in the coming up week.
Well, Liza, she's out of Santa Cruz. Really interesting woman, and so we had a great conversation a couple weeks ago, and one of the sometimes you have a little bit of whiskey and I start surfing GoDaddy for ideas, right? And so I bought askmeaboutmotorcycles.com and askmeaboutscooters.com. I was like, how the hell is that available? I don't know, but I guess I'm going to, spend $22. And so I bought them. And she bought motorcycleambassadors.com. And one of the ideas presented as a simple ambassadorship program was an Ask Me About Motorcycles campaign.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And so Liza took it on herself to take that idea and run with it. She's got a bunch of podcasts that are kind of aligned with her, and the whole community out there, of course. And they're going to be doing these Ask Me About Motorcycles T-shirts, and literally all it is just a simple catalyst to start to be in public and to have somebody who maybe doesn't understand why a sport bike looks like a sport bike ask that one weird question about motorcycling that they're too embarrassed to ask on a sales floor, and to just get the sometimes you just got to be the spark, and then the rest starts to happen.
Itself, yeah. Well, I look forward to
again, little initiatives like that are available on the report, and anybody can engage and go do that.
Yeah, and I look forward to talking to you in the future about the Ask Me About Motorcycles campaign that's going to hopefully take off and explode and turn into a nationwide or worldwide phenomenon.
It's not hard to do. Advertising and community has never been easier to access. And you just have to be true to a new rider's perspective, and not just come in with your own goggles on what is cool in motorcycling. And because as far as I'm concerned, if it's got two wheels and a motor, I dig it.
There you go. Well, Robert, I really want to tell you how appreciative I am of you giving me some of your time to talk about Give a Shift. And I'd like for you to reiterate the URL again so that people can go find it. And if you could do that for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's at www.motogiveashift.com, and you can sign up for a newsletter there and read. I've got a whole bunch of links for industry stories and stuff, and then download the reports. There's even an audio recording from a Give a Shift happy hour. There's a 1 hour long audio presentation that I hogged the mic for most of, but that was that's all on there. It's all free, and love it or hate it, there it is. And I hope that in a few years from now we're talking about the growth of middleweight motorcycles and the excitement of riding bikes.
I hope so too, and I look forward to you being a big part of that.
Thanks very much, Wes, for the attention and for everything you've done to help elevate motorcycling as well.
Hey, no problem. Because this podcast is produced by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America, in every episode I highlight one benefit of being a member. I admit it's an enticement to get you to our website and get you to join for at least 1 year. I've been a member since 1999 and have used the member benefits to my advantage countless times since then, especially the roadside assistance program. But that's not what I'm going to tell you about today. Today, it's all about the MOA's annual gathering. This year, it's being held from July 12th to the 15th in Des Moines, Iowa. It's near the middle of the country, so just about anybody can get there in a couple of days. You may think that Iowa is all cornfields and open skies, but there's a lot more to the state than just that. They also have soybean fields. Oh, I'm kidding, but that made me laugh when I thought of it, so I had to share it with you. I was skeptical at first when they told me the rally was going to be in Des Moines, but then I had the opportunity to visit the city back in October, and it is a fantastic city. I was blown away by the hospitality of the people who live there. I don't know what they're called, Iowaers or Iowans or something like that, but they're wonderful people. The food, pick a place and walk through the door, you're going to be amazed. I even found the best vegan tacos ever in Des Moines, Iowa. What are the odds of that? And sure, you could blaze your way there on the interstates, but I'm of the opinion that if you can't make getting to Des Moines an adventure or anywhere else, then you're just not trying hard enough. Or you don't have enough time. I know I'm planning on staying off the freeways as much as possible and even trying to patronize mom and pop establishments along the way, visiting friends and family, trying to make it less a slog and more an adventure. Anytime you have to go a long distance across the country or half the country, it's going to be tough. I'm a little more excited about the annual rally this year than I have been in a long time, and that's maybe in spite of knowing how much work our team has been doing and will be doing to help get it going, especially the last couple of weeks before the rally starts. It's all going to be worth it when it happens. People are going to lose their minds, I think, in a good way, when they get to the Iowa State Fairgrounds. It's one of the nicest fairgrounds that I've ever seen. And granted, my sample set is small. I've only been to about 10 fairgrounds around the country, but still, it's modern, it's well laid out, it's easy to get to everything, and it's excellent in just about every way you can possibly imagine. Head on over to bmwmoa.org and take a look at the promo video. Then you can take advantage of the February-only registration special and sign up 2 people to attend for just $99. You don't have to be a member of the MOA to attend, and you barely even have to register as human to know you're going to have fun. Plus, you never know, yours might be the name they pull out of the bin on Saturday evening as the winner of a brand new BMW motorcycle. Think of it then as 2 raffle tickets for under $100. They even let you win if you're not there when they pull the name out. So register, join us in Des Moines, and have more fun than anybody in the middle of all that corn has a right to have. I want to thank you for coming back for the 15th episode of Chasing the Horizon, which featured a discussion with Robert Pandya, motorcycle industry marketing expert and the inspiration behind Give a Shift. Our next episode will feature a discussion with Portia Taylor, the editor of Black Girls Ride magazine. That episode will be out on March 5th. Andrew Finberg composed and recorded our theme music. Karen Hawker designed our logo. Thanks again to all our guests and listeners for giving us their time. We'll see you out there somewhere on the road. Or off it. Ride safe.